Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures, self-knowledge. With your hosts, Daniel and Eduardo, this is the Know Thyself podcast. Welcome to the Know Thyself podcast. I am here with Daniel.
Hello.
And I am Eduardo. And season 4, man, I'm very happy to be in this seat here across from you and ready to kick everything off and have a great conversation. And Daniel and I were talking about the conversation that we didn't have the last episode of the season, where we kind of were, normally revisiting the experiences that we had throughout season 3 and what would be to come with those experiences, reflecting, the steps that we're taking for season 4. And, essentially we finished season 3, which was a great ending. I thought it was a great ending to season 3, what we did with Pisces. And, it took some time to start off here. So it's good to see you, man.
So good to see you. It's kind of interesting. Usually our season breaks are like 2 weeks, but life had different plans. We speak about that before. If you want to make the universe laugh, tell it your plans. And we've kind of had experiences that have just prolonged this conversation, but I'm so excited to be here and to continue this journey with each and every one of you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to all the members and fans and people who have just, written to us through the website or have messaged us directly about, what topics they've been wanting for us to speak about, what they've wanted us to, do as far as interactions. So there's gonna be a lot going on in this season. So one of the main things, as far as for me, a goal is to organize our, not just our thoughts, but have this overarching theme that could carry the season with somewhat of the idea regarding application, but also what Daniel and I kind of came down to was really understanding energy and understanding, what the discipline of all these philosophies sort of are at the core is how to apply them in order to not maybe, repeat some sort of suffering or have some sort of, issues in life that aren't addressed properly. And so the interaction of what we do and how we're all connected is something that I think everybody in our community understands, but these are separate disciplines that we've brought up throughout the last 3 seasons, but they all interact as one, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to know what now with the information and how do we, move through these energy fields, because we all have our own structures, right? And that's something I really want to talk about today. You, me, have our own structures that, create those pathways of energy, and there's a definition for it, even in Sanskrit for what those pathways are, but we'll get to that later down the road when we bring up many of the topics that I know we're going to break down, like the Kundalini energy or Kundalini awakening that people might already be familiar with, and other things that we might already brought up. Like, I know we didn't shy away from talking about Taoism and what that means in the way, and understanding how to function within these energies will be something I'm very excited to explore with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as the 4th season, we were kind of having this discussion because there's so many ways that we can go in so many directions, because the topics within the esoteric are endless and they include everything, so it is this interesting thing. The 3rd season, really, there was not a lot of room of creativity because we were following certain pathways.
Right.
We were following the zodiac wheel, and we were working the way through the tarot. And of course there was extra episodes that kind of came in, like the breakdown of the Pinocchio movie. But this season was really unique because we know we're going to continue the tarot series and the journey of the Fool. But it was what is the direction that we want to take this? Again, there's so many topics like Gnosticism, the Kabbalah, that we can't wait to converse on. But being the 4th season, and 4th being this idea of the creation of structure and the creation, we really kind of were looking through comments and emails And one of the big words is that you already said was like application and utilization. How do we take these unique cosmic patterns that we've had these discussions on and incorporate into our active lifestyle? And that becomes a really big important step, because as you become aware of these patterns and these energies, you're almost expected to align yourself with them. It's like, that the power of this knowledge then brings the responsibility. And we really kind of come into this spot of like taking the knowledge of this curiosity about learning these subjects and then actually putting it into action, which we spoke about before, is that component of wisdom, which is proper action, proper knowledge and action. And so I'm really excited about this, to discuss how we apply these principles in ways that are going to enrich not only our studying, but also bring a concentrated awareness and direction to our unfoldment. And, really kind of start that conversation there. But it's really like the fourth leg of the table. It's really like how we kind of stabilize and direct this energy. And energy, like you said, is going to be the main topic, because electromagnetic energy is that base structure that we've been working with since the first episode. And this understanding of how do we utilize this energy in a responsible way, that's going to kind of light up the house rather than burn the house down.
Totally. That's awesome, man. Man, it's really good to see you, or to do this with you. It's been a minute, as you said, because a lot of things have happened in the last, I think it's been about 4 weeks since we, were able to sort of sit together and do this recording. But, taking a break showed me something that I wanted to even bring up when we talk about Taoism, or we talk about, Chinese Eastern philosophy of the act of not doing or going in flow. And we've talked about that before. We've talked about what it's like to see the energy that carries a river and how powerful a river can be, and how instinctively it is to, if you fall in the river or step into the river and the current starts to take you, you want to go against the current in order to survive. But sometimes the survival depends on you having trust in just letting go and being able to flow into that energy. And so that's something that happened in the last 4 weeks for me. Just kind of doing some different readings, even just I've been reading a little bit on Rudolf Steiner and just other individuals that just have their own philosophies of, the application of these structures. And one thing that I had to separate is sort of and I know, well, again, we're talking very generically right now because we're going to be addressing these things more specifically, just as a side note to the audience. But, one of the things that really kind of resonated in the last year was the understanding of what karma is and the genetic code that we all carry and the pattern of that vibration that we carry that reaches those structures that allow us to have, some sort of enlightenment or some sort of period of wanting to research that. Because if you have a level of, let's just say spiritual maturity, well, only then will you want to call upon it, others and yourself to learn about what these energies represent and how to function with them. And everybody has their own way. And I think that doing this season, rather doing this series with you on this podcast, you get that from different people who are reaching out, who are very well versed in one practice, maybe not very well versed in another. But overall, everybody's story of people who have reached out to us thus far start with some kind of impact in their life that leads them to want to understand more complex philosophies or ways of living that have aided them through difficult times. We talk about that with the Dark Night of the Soul, and we talked about what that really means. We talk about how to apply, certain moments in your life through the 7 stages of alchemy, all these other things. But we don't really ever talk about how everybody's going to have different periods in their life where this resonates with them and where it doesn't resonate with them. And that all has to do with energy and the coding that they have for their process while they're here as an individual. Because if we're all connected, as one living being, connecting to source, with the above down to the below, there's different, stages that we're going to walk into where we don't feel that resonates with us just yet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that there's no way of reaching a form of like enlightenment. But, energy, in my opinion, is a parallel to consciousness. And so like it's still happening through you. It's a parallel occurrence that, if you're going to rise in consciousness, you have to understand how to rise your vibration. But to rise your vibration, you may have unconscious ways of reaching that with experiences, whether it's traumatic experiences or, experiences that you go seeking out for yourself in your journey. And we've talked, like you said, in the Fool's Journey, we've talked about that, quite extensively. Even like just talking about Pinocchio and the story. In the last season, we talk a lot on these journeys that lead us to this. But that's what I'm really, I guess, overall excited, is understanding like what these charges are, between negative and positive, what they do when they actually meet, and how they become awakening. And something that you said earlier is how it could damage our process if we're not ready to receive that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I think is going to be a really important conversation is just how authentically individualized the spiritual process is. And that whole pathway of knowing thyself and being able to look inside and investigate and incorporate our consciousness into wholeness allows for us to navigate our own unique path. And that's really important. That was what was so rich about alchemy, is it's not this like step-by-step guide. It's more of this understanding of, this is the archetypes that you're going to experience with. This is the patterns of consciousness that you're going to dance with. But your own individual relationship to this is going to be very unique to you.
Right.
And that awareness and that understanding, one of the very big components that we look to instill into ourselves is to stop looking over the fence at others and being like, oh, well, these people need to go to yoga to connect to spirituality, so I need to go to yoga.
Right.
Although when I go to yoga, it doesn't like connect me to this awareness, or I can't just sit in one room and meditate, so there's something wrong with me. I'm not interested in, I don't have the fascination with like crystals or like rituals like they do, so there's something wrong with me.
Right.
No, you are your own individual blossoming of the universal consciousness, and it's going to be very unique to you. It's not the same pattern. I think there's kind of this component sometimes in spirituality where we almost just get trendy like every other subculture. And there's this idea of like, oh, I have to listen to this kind of music, or I have to carry myself this way. That's not what this is about. It's really about the unfoldment of you, and authentically unfolding that without expectations and without, putting limits to what we allow to express through us. With this idea of energy and how it works through us, yeah, it's a very interesting experience of, becoming that container of this universal life force energy, which is already working through us. Mm-hmm. But making sure that we make by step improvements and development of our character, we raise our capacity to be able to take more of this energy in and flow it through us in a more of a, less resistance kind of pattern, and so there's not going to be just like these exercises of like, hey, you do this breathing exercise to awaken your Kundalini, because that's going to be an overcharge of a system. You have to have the capacity to take in that electrical force. It's like if you put a bunch of energy, if like, the power lines that are outside your house, if there wasn't that transformer that drops down that energy for your house to receive it, it's going to like blow out those light bulbs, and it's going to burn down your house, because your house doesn't have that capacity to take the energy in its raw state like that. Well, we are working with a really powerful energy here. And so the steps that we're going to be kind of discussing are not so much of like waking that energy up, but becoming a more cleansed, purified container so that energy can naturally awaken within us and it can express itself. But there's not going to be any shortcuts. There's no breathing exercises that are going to be able to do this. Like when you you become the container, of course you can do that and operate in that way. But it's not going to be this like, oh, you do this, and it's going to awaken. And that's a really important thing to kind of look at. And, a part of energy, obviously, we'll be talking about vibration. And one of the big subjects that we're going to kind of look into is like language and the spoken word, and investigate that subject deeper. We spoke about that a lot in like the first season of looking beyond just the definition of a word and investigating the etymology, but also the phonetic makeup. And I think like a great way to kind of even explore this further is like even just taking the word beautiful. If you like phonetically break that up, it's be the full you. Be the full you. That's what's beautiful, is when you actually are shining through what the universal consciousness has like designed you to be. It didn't design you to be like anybody else. Mm-hmm. And allowing for that authentic expression is the main process of this spiritual journey. It's this interesting component when we kind of go from, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but from like sheeps to the shepherds of right. like guiding our energy. And it's not a competition. And it's really this idea of like, no, how do I actually like blossom and let this universal light and energy shine through me without blocking it? How do I almost get out of the way and assist in this naturally life force energy to bring on the evolution that it desires?
Absolutely, man. I mean, well, first of all, again, man, it's so exciting to be able to start talking about all this now, because it's been something I've been sitting on for a while in regards to one of the things you just touched on is not only what happens to you being a unique process, but also, understanding how we have been programmed in a way to believe, that say the act of not doing is doing, but some people just don't understand that contradiction, or they think of it as a contradiction, which isn't a contradiction at all. But being passive in the Western world can be seen as some sort of idea of being, lazy and not being able to reach a level of consciousness that we're seeking to reach. But no, the energy that flows through you will speak to you in the way and in times where you need to sit still with that and then let the vibration sort of build up to a point where there is this moment of reaching a climactic point where you can actually move forward into the next level. And we say that all the time with the next octave, but it's something that I've noticed with just the messages from people and just people all around me, is that what they're letting affect them and what they're not letting affect them, and what thoughts, I know that we'll talk about Stoicism in this season. I'd like to talk about Stoicism, but one thing that I know Marcus Aurelius has talked about too has something to do with that sort of Eastern philosophy as well, of, worrying about yourself and worrying not about the past or the future, but understanding what the present has to offer is part of that sort of not passive flow, but letting yourself experience the moment at hand rather than living in the future, which we've talked about creates this anxiousness in people that then creates a thought pattern that creates those patterns into reality. And then there's validation for someone thinking, this is what's happening to me, not this is what's happening for me. And I think the distinction between those two has something very significant for all of us in our life path. And it's happened for me personally in the last years, just having to change that mindset of this is happening for me. It's not happening to me. And it's a discipline. It's its own meditation. It's what has worked for me to receive and expel energy out at the same time, because there are moments where you need to sit quietly, as I was saying, and receive the information and then know what to do with it. But taking action preemptively sometimes is what's going to cause you that harm, is letting the energy sort of not fester, but sort of this energy like build up out of your thoughts rather than, exploring the options of what you're going to do with that given moment when it actually comes. And so I think that, that's in the last 3 seasons has been something that I've been like working through. I'm like, okay, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? what's my issue with what I'm studying about and what I'm not studying about, and how am I, how am I using this information? And a lot of it I just had to, again, push away, like the last 4 weeks that we've had, away from the recordings of season 4 have given me such clarity and just peace to just understand, like, oh, I am not these thoughts, and these thoughts do exist, but they're not necessarily embedded in evil, or not necessarily embedded in just all positive. They're both positive and negative. And so that's something that I really want to get into with energy, how energy works in those negative charges and then those positive charges and what they represent. And back to what you just said about language, I can't wait to touch on what that really means as well with the word negative and positive, masculine, feminine, like what those things represent, especially when we start talking about the Kundalini energy. Those who already are pretty well versed will understand where we're coming from, but I don't want to leave anyone out of it thinking that we're just, being generic or not really understanding like what we're trying to present when we talk about negative and positive energies colliding together in order to create that flow. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of the positive and negative, the positive being the assertive force and the negative being the receiving force.
Right.
And it's all going to come down to circuits, opening circuits and closing circuits, and how this reality truly operates. And that awareness in that idea of detaching ourselves from our attachments of what we want this reality to be, to more the sober, non-drunk aspect of like accepting what this reality is. That's a huge process. There's going to be, especially as we make our way through, there's components about this human experience that are very difficult to process, and understanding how that operates and separating ourselves from like our emotional reaction to certain kinds of things, and really, again, taking away those expectations. That's how we are going to take away these blocks so this energy can freely flow through us. And so I think that's going to be a really big process too, of taking a deeper look at like what is truly truth and what is my idea and my wants of truth, and making that movement away from the subjective desire to the objective awareness, and observing, just like you said, we are going to get negative thoughts. We are going to have negative emotional patterns. Well, it's the action of those, which, do we create actions, and do we react to those emotional patterns in a negative way, or do we observe them? There's something really great about negative emotions when they come up, because if you just observe it, you can actually, and not attach yourself to it, well, that emotional pattern retreats when it doesn't grab your attention. And it goes right back to the scar or the wound within your consciousness. So you can actually like follow it back. And so utilizing even things that we only attach these finite understandings of like, oh, this is bad. No, you can utilize the bad to incorporate a further process of self-discovery. It's how we apply this information.
Totally.
It's all about the gray. It's what you do with the actions. And that's why we're, really looking at the actions and the focus on how do we utilize this information. And it really does. It takes a lot of responsibility, and it takes a lot of care. And, through this process of like this growth of this awareness and this alchemical marriage, we are going to look into the components of the active part of our consciousness, which is the masculine, and the receiving, which would be the negative feminine force. And we're going to learn how to utilize those components of consciousness in a much more clear way. If you even think about the game of chess, the queen is a piece that doesn't really have any rules. It can move all over the board. No piece on the chessboard is as fluid and has the capacity to move like the queen does. And that is because the feminine energy is nonlinear. You know, it's if the masculine breaks things up into parts and it's black and white, well, the feminine is the rainbow. It's the intuition. It's
Right.
the void. Where the masculine piece, which is the king, it moves step by step. It can only move one square at a time. And this is a really great way of understanding the spiritual process. It's one step at a time to formulate this kingdom of our self-sovereignty. And even through that, you know, one of the things that we always put pressure on ourselves is always to be moving forward. Well, it's not a problem in chess if you move a piece forward and then move it back. You don't get mad at that piece and you're like, oh, I'm losing this. No, you're readjusting to the circumstances that were provided to you. And sometimes it's the taking the step back of an approach that we made is really where we gain that spiritual clarity to go in the direction that we need to go. And, you know, we really do perceive this and we attach ourselves to this linear timeline, but this consciousness that we're dealing with is one step above logic. There's no equation that we can write that's going to find us our spiritual, you know, higher self. It's a unique process that has steps forward and steps back, and sometimes it's the steps back that you actually see the capacity of of not only your energy field, but you really start to see some potential. And so, utilizing these two components in a way to bring us back to that wholeness that we desire. You know, we all got separated with the two hemispheres of the brain. So it's our personal responsibility to climb Jacob's ladder to unify those two hemispheres of the brain so we're welcomed back into the Garden of Eden. And so that's going to be something that we look to explore. And, you know, I think it's a really good time to explore this. And you know, we really kind of, when we look at these two components, detaching ourselves of like what we identify as like gender and human sex, and more understand the universal principles that are immutable in this universe. There are immutable laws that are just, you know, you give an action, it provides its reaction. There's no feelings to it. The universe doesn't care if you're offended or not. If you do not align yourself to the principles, you're going to feel an action that's going to have, you know, it's going to bring kind of like pain and suffering to you. And, you know, even through this process, we're kind of learning just the importance of pain, because pain is actually the component that allows us, you know, that idea of like no pain, no gain. There's something very deep and true about that, not only in the component of like what we gain as like physically, but when it kind of comes to energy, you know, even on like an amplifier, gain raises the vibration and it pushes out more sound and brings more energy through the amplifier. And so there's actually like a really deep significance to that. So again, understanding this process of like what we are actually navigating through here, and kind of, again, detaching the personal expectations of what we want and surrendering to what we need.
And I know that a lot of people who've reached out to us have said the same thing, you know, how it's changed their life to, you know, start dabbling in the process of, you know, not only to getting to know their way of receiving sort of an exchange of energy with individuals, but how to, you know, give it back. And I think that's like something I kind of go back and forth with. And I think the only way I can explain that, and this has happened to me in the last 3 weeks, I've had to do a lot of filming. And the only thing that's got me through enjoying is just like the enjoyment of filming. Mm-hmm. And when I enjoy it, I get to realize like I love people. And when I hang out with people, then there's these very interesting openings. And like, if I can, I'll just give you some examples. But like one of these things I was shooting recently, everyone's very intense. So the energy is very intense, and they're intense because there's a timeline, there's a budget, and they're putting a lot of faith and their own energy into having me go there and do this project. One of the things that they were forcing, as a very literal example here, is they wanted individuals in this one scene to explore the new library they built in this community. And there was nobody in there. There was no people in there yet. Even though it's completely stacked with books, it's really, really actually aesthetically beautiful. And I could feel that they were so upset. And so I kind of walked away. I left my camera gear there. I think I went to the bathroom and I came back, and there was this older gentleman. And he's just standing there, just looking at my camera gear. Now, the people that I'm working with are kind of in another corner of the library. And this older guy is just kind of looking at all my camera gear, and he's sitting there. And so I walk up to him, and I struck up a conversation. And at that point, what I had done is, now looking back, and I'll talk between what was happening and what I was realizing was occurring with just me and this gentleman. So I had let go of the energy that was super intense of the people wanting this stage shot, and let them talk amongst themselves. And I just found myself having a good conversation with this guy. And as we start to talk, we kind of just hit it off, and he was really funny. And after we were talking about, what my camera gear was for, I looked at him and I said, "Hey, would you mind just going around the library and looking at some books and sort of checking them out? I mean, obviously this isn't going to be candid, but just something, And he looks at me, he's like, "I thought you'd never ask." And we just kind of laughed. And so I got all these great shots with this one guy, finished the shots with him. And I was looking through the frame of two different cameras. And so I'm looking at him, I'm seeing how to frame his hands, pulling a book out, all of this other stuff that I have to do, creatively speaking. So my peripherals are kind of closed off. So when I was done, I look up, and the people who were so wound up tight and were so kind of concerned with the hour I have of filming this, they seemed relaxed. I saw something else in their faces. There wasn't this sort of tension. And I look over and I was like, "Oh, I know what that is." They're relieved to know that I just got that shot. They weren't relieved that I got the shot. They were relieved to know who they were working with. They said, "We watched you talking to him for a while, and then you guys kind of had a laugh. I don't know what the inside joke was. And then you kind of took all these different positions into, moving him around. We don't even know what you got, but it looked very flawless, as far as a very easy." And I felt better. I felt like I could talk to these people a little bit more. Before, it was my way of conversing with them were just sort of analytical sort of responses of just, this is what we need and this is what we might have to do, to now them kind of realizing oh, this is the person who does the thing behind the piece of equipment that we've hired him to do. It's not so much the camera and the gear, it's you. It's you and how you interact with people. And I was trying to take that as a compliment, but also give it back to them and say, well, that's why I'm excited to work with you, because you guys are excited about this community you have here, me filming. And then they kind of had an aha moment where they're like, can we just have fun like this all the time? I'm like, this is what it's supposed to be. And so I know it's a long little story there, but it's what's been happening more and more lately to me is as I just let go and sort of connect to that childlike self that allows for the energy to come through me authentically and also be able to give it back authentically. And everything seems to work out. I could have never planned that shot with this guy. And nor did I look at him. I'm like, you're the guy I'm going to use. We just had an authentic connection, and that's all that needed to be done. And so that's some of the stuff that I can't wait to talk about in this next season with all these applications. It's not just energy. It can sound so intense, right? Sometimes it's oh, this buildup of energy, and then how do I expel this energy? But there's a way to harness it. You're talking about these containers that we are. There's a way to harness it and release it in good doses, and being able to just sort of attract what you want and sort of push away what you don't need, but also be aware of that polarity that we'll talk about again, with that balance between, you said something that really struck with me from before I started going on this rant, is you said understanding the pain and how to understand the gain. And that's part of that balance, of what pain and joy actually are, and how to receive, the experience with, an understanding of both, again, the negative charge and the positive charge, and what you can do for your surroundings. So,
yeah, no, I think that is such a great story to detail what we're talking about with this electrical flow and that flow state. The component of you not trying to live in scarcity and put yourself in like this victim mode of like, oh, the people aren't here, this isn't going to work out.
Right.
Rather than that, you just gave your authentic attention and gave your capacity to connect. So you give the energy out, and then your solution was provided by the universe and you received it back in.
Right.
This is so important. This is the component of like giving and receiving. This is part of these universal principles that we're looking at here.
Totally.
Giving and receiving, letting that kind of come back, and not, again, utilizing the same thought process that kind of got us into the situation, but rising above it and stepping out of the way so the universe can provide a solution that you didn't even think was possible. You know, this is kind of like almost in line with one of the conversations that we'll be approaching, is like separating the idea even between the brain and the mind. You know, we combine those ideas. They're two different things. The brain is localized in your body. The brain is just the container of what the mind operates through.
Right.
The brain is going to be buried or cremated with you. It doesn't go with you. And the brain works in a way that it's stuck in the linear. So the brain kind of is what worries about the past, and it like worries about the future. And it's this like limiting part. And most of us live in the brain. It's only when you're actually in the moment that the mind can actually work through you. The mind is not localized. The mind is not only connected to all of your past experiences and understanding, but the mind is connected to the collective, and it's how the collective works through you. That's what the flow state is. The flow state is, you know, getting the brain balanced so the mind can truly operate through. And this is when we have internal realizations. This is when we have, you know, downloads. Mm-hmm. This is where, you know, innovation and invention comes from. It's from the mind. It's a capacity that's above us. And it's like non-localized, where the brain wants to just like, you know, the brain stores the memories and things like that, but it's only like what it electrically can like reach. And that's why, you know, you remember everything that ever happened to you. When you were walking through the grocery store, maybe this morning, you remember every color of everybody's shirt. But whether your brain has the capacity to create that electrical charge to recall that memory, well, that's a little different. That takes a lot. But say you're walking now later on and you're going to a restaurant and you see somebody that was in the same shirt, all of a sudden you're able to like retain that memory, and it comes back and you're like, oh, I saw that person earlier. Where if you came back from the store, I'm like, what was the person who was picking the oranges? What was their shirt? You're like, I don't know. But like you saw them now, you like get to attach to it, you know?
Right.
So this is, again, what we're working with. How do we utilize our instruments and containers to allow this electrical force to flow through us so we can express this innovation and invention, this non-limitless potential, which that universal life force is? Again, taking away the blocks in the system. You know, resistance in an electrical outlet, it resists the electrical heat and it builds up heat. It resists the electrical current and it builds up heat. Well, that's what hell is. It's the resistance in an electrical cycle. And you're putting this block so this universal life force can't flow through you. You know, we have to become spiritual electricians. We are expected to understand this. And so if we don't operate in accordance to it, we're going to feel the challenging effects of it. That's why pain is presented to us, because it's trying to get our awareness that we need to become more aware of something. It's a teacher. That's what Saturn represents. Creates resistance so you understand how to take that resistance out and let that flow work through us. You know, not only do we put blocks in our electrical systems, in our electrical currents, but there's also stagnation. You know, a lot of us kind of approach the idea of like, oh, I'm tired, I need to sleep a bunch. And we might go and sleep for 10 hours and for some reason we wake up tired again. Well, you recharge the system. But what if there's a compartment of your life that's not getting expression? What if you're not being creative right now and you have a bunch of creative energy that's stagnant? Well, you could sleep for 4 days in a row and you're still going to wake up tired because you can't recharge that because the energy's not moving. And so this is also going to kind of give us the awareness of what are the components of our energy fields? What are those deep spiritual desires? So we make sure we move all this energy through us and we become aware of all 12 slices of that pie. This is why we had to approach the subject of astrology, because it allowed to give us those base desires and currents to make sure that we fulfill that and work through that. And we're going to utilize the component of like the transits of astrology in this season to understand how we work through that, and how we do complete ourselves out and we don't leave a part of ourselves behind, to allow for this electrical flow to truly just like work through us. And again, light the house up rather than burn it down or be like a dim, like 35-watt light bulb that doesn't like really illuminate. Like we really want to like light this up, because that's what we really are. That universal light force is the energy that is. The body is just like the bulb that the universal life force works through. And if the circuits are not flowing or there's resistance, it doesn't light up as much. And that's when people are like dim-witted. It means that universal life force isn't working through them and they're not like lighting up. That's that component, because again, it's like the infinite potential of that force. And it's the life force. We spoke about this, you can tell when something is dead from afar because it's lacking that like energy. There's like this essence that's gone, and that's when decay happens. And so, we'll even kind of discuss, and we're going to explore some mythological stories, but we can see this in our cultures and our societies. As we've taken away the meaning of life and only focused on the emotion, it's getting kind of stinky because it's decaying, because we lost that life force that usually runs through that provides significance to this experience. And what we're on now is just kind of the carnal carnival, going up and down and kind of getting hypnotized by the lights in, the music. And we're just kind of going round and round on that hamster wheel rather than like actually seeing, what this truly is and what our purpose is here and finding that individual purpose.
Right. Yep. I mean, metaphorically speaking, I always say, the energy that you bring to your house illuminates every room within it. And the house that we are talking about isn't the one that's made of all these walls, but the one that is our home on this planet together as one unified consciousness that we want to create. And you'll feel it when you make a community. When people are part of a community, they're exchanging energies back and forth, and that blog that you talk about may not exist in that community. So they feel like, oh, me and this community, we're more than just one. We're all. Mm-hmm. And you want to do that with all facets of your life. And I think it doesn't have to just be to one thing, like a discipline and a hobby like yoga, or like your choir course that you're taking, or whatever you might be. You might find solidarity there. You might find some sort of like connection with any other individual, but like try to figure out what other rooms in your house are, like you said, dim, where you can remove that blockage and illuminate that room and go, oh, there's another room to this house that I didn't know about. We have an endless amount of these rooms that we can walk into throughout, I think, hopefully the entirety of our life, and where we walk to, you want the energy to flow with you. And as you light up a room, there's other people in there who will notice that, and they'll say that. They're like, when you walked into the room, we noticed you walked into the room. It felt good. It felt good to be around you. And you want to be able to contribute for the greater cause of that positive energy. Because even, and again, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but even if you remember closely, when Neo wakes up for the first time in the Matrix and he realizes that his energy is only being used as a battery, that's exactly what's happening all around us right now. The energy that we're exchanging is being funneled into something that needs us to generate power for another entity and purpose. And that could be for your social media, it could be for your stats and your job, it could be for anything. But, overall, it's not really contributing to the society in the way that it could have ultimate potential for peace, harmony, and a love that is beyond, I think, even our understanding, that only people who really experience spiritual or universal connection to like maybe source or God, then feel, when it all kind of connects, they realize like, oh my gosh, this is what everyone's been talking about, or this is what I've been waiting to feel. But it's hard when you're being subjected to other outlets throughout this house of this metaphorical idea of the house needing energy. There's these sneaky outlets that will pop into your house. And when you plug in, you're like, hey, wait, where's that going? It's like someone else is taking that right now because they need that in order to keep that merry-go-round you talk about powered on, And so it's kind of a tricky situation. It's not like to say shame on you for using these, outlets that are going to basically charge other sources that are going to steal that energy from you. No, it's something that we have to discover on our own, throughout the journey in this world where you're like, this is where I'm putting my energy towards. Like, how could I have done that? And I know that's happened multiple times already for me in my 35 years on earth, is that there's times where I looked at myself and I'm like, wow, those 3 or 4 years really were dedicated to this, like, I don't know, this hobby or this band or this political like ideology where nothing came from it other than just me giving away energy but not receiving anything back. And sometimes there's the opposite of that. You receive, there's an ebb and flow where you're like, no, this is something that I always did. Whether it's like hiking in nature, that always gives me that ebb and flow. Like there's a little bit of a arduous process of just getting yourself motivated, getting yourself there. But once you start walking outside and you realize like, okay, here's this oxygen that is being used up by my body, and also this carbon dioxide is being created, and you realize that the animals and beings around you are also in that same state of flow with oxygen as like the main connection, then you kind of start to realize, oh, wait, no, we are all interconnected, and this was good for me. And it doesn't have to be the craziest hike in the world, but you have this idea of like, this is where energy is, is going not only through me, but it's coming back into me, and it's making me a better receiver of this energy, but also a person who can contribute some energy back out there. And so that's something that, I know we're going to, tackle a little bit in this season that I'm excited for, the reasonings behind these energies that are, being used for, not malicious intent, but, in the intent of progress, the sake of progress. I know a lot of people right now are kind of wondering, like, where are we going with all this? What is this? Like, how much further do we go just because we can? We're going to lose a component of the talent of our soul's contribution to this planet if we just give it all to artificial intelligence or give it all to, some being that doesn't have that connection that we've talked about so often with as above and so below. And I think that that's where you start to smell that stench you're talking about, Mm-hmm. So again, it's exciting. I'm excited. I know that I can speak for all of us when I say spiritual electricians all the way, man. I think that finding that connection is what's going to be, always the root of having an experience that you didn't know you could have, but also never feeling alone. And I think that's an interesting process we all go through, is that feeling of loneliness. But truly, you just need to replug and connect to the right source.
Yeah, absolutely. This universal life force is the absence of it is the root of, that loneliness and that gluttony that we see in the world. It's the absence of this universal love that creates the addict. It's the absence of this universal love who creates the narcissist, because there's a component of life that is the basis of life that they're not finding fulfillment. So they're finding it through drugs. They're finding it through food. They're finding it through these negative uses of their energy. Because we are always creating. You can't not create in this world. All your actions are leading to creation. And this just makes us more consciously aware of, what am I creating? What am I actually producing with my labors? And it's really important, and as we see the importance of our energy, its use and its development and its creation in this world, we become a lot more conscious of every other creator in this world. Right. This current of the sea that we find ourselves in, this currency of electricity, it's just not our energy that's going out into the world. We're also receiving energy back from everybody else. And this is a really important thing to be aware of, because, you receive energy and we carry it. We spoke about that a lot in Pisces. One of the big components that we're going to speak about is how to protect your energy. We're going to investigate that idea in the process of like, what are my thoughts and what aren't my thoughts? What is an automatic emotional response that I have, and how do I actually truly feel in my heart center about that? We are very programmable. We can very much become an android, and there's automatic processes that happen, and pushing and pulling ourselves away from those automatic processes is a big part of finding who we are and getting back to the core of like, no, this is me. And so I think that that's going to be, a really interesting discussion that we kind of go further with and navigating that. But, it's the magician is not just about, creating energy and putting it out into the worlds. There's a big role of the magician is, protecting its energy and making sure that, its conscious awareness and its attention is directed by itself, and it's not getting fed in, and it's not consenting its energy to any other fields of, influence. Because again, nobody can actually take your energy from you, but you can consent to giving your energy to something that you actually might not want. And that component of like taking that back and taking away the verbal consent that we give for our energy to go away, as well as the silent consent that we give away, is also going to be something that needs to kind of be personally investigated and an awareness brought to that. And so, it's going to be a really interesting thing to kind of discuss. I know we're going to go deeper into the alchemical process with like alchemical exercises. We're really going to look at the idea of following the cycles and patterns of nature through the zodiac and what we do in certain kinds of times, especially because we've kind of learned the qualities of these zodiac signs and these planets. So now we're going to discover, how do we actually utilize these in real time? I know we've got some unique mythological and stories that we're going to look at. And also, like always, we love breaking down like film and media. So it's all going to kind of be included, but that overarching theme of energy, in how we not only incorporate it into ourselves and let that flow through so we can touch that flow state, but also how we can push it out into the world to create and assist in that universal evolution of consciousness.
Cool. That's awesome, man. I mean, again, I'm just excited, man. I'm just a happy camper over here. Just, I want to reserve a lot of this information for our episodes, just because I know that this morning we were going to do this, and then we did this in this afternoon. And like, I was like so jazzed to see you later in the afternoon, because I'm like, oh yeah, there's just such a buildup of my own energy to want to talk about this on our first recording. And then when you came and we did this, I was like, oh, okay, I feel so much more at ease on how I want to, approach this and not let people feel like we're just going 100 miles an hour. But then again, the greatest honor is being able to have a conversation with you that I hope contributes to that same collective consciousness you just mentioned. You know what I mean? Because that's what we're doing here. You know what I mean? It's not for, the approval of the many. It's just to accompany the many and let them know, like, hey, these conversations are happening in this small room somewhere in Arizona where, two, great friends of many years get to have this exchange that then goes out to the rest to reassure them that, hey, they're not alone. At least you got two great friends in Arizona that are here to, explore every corner of what these energies represent, these disciplines represent, these philosophies represent, and what it means to just walk each other home is probably just the greatest thing that we could do, or at least I could do. So.
Absolutely. I love that, man. No, it is. It's the greatest honor in the world. And we are just so excited that the conversations we carry today resonate with you. And yeah, all aboard for the 4th season. Let's do it. Let's get deep down this alchemical process of self-individuation. And I'm excited to really take these further steps down that journey.
Cool, man. Well, again, I know this is a short episode here, just shy of an hour, but just wanted to again thank all of you for your patience as we build up everything that we've done so far to create the season, which will be season 4, and we got a lot of surprises along the way and a lot more conversations of the new, the old, and what we've already covered in between. So I'm glad you brought up the Tarot, because I can't wait to sort of keep going into the idea of what that imagery that we've already broken down, does for that application that we've already discussed in this first episode. And so all on board, man.
No, I think until next time.
Until next time then.